Well, welcome everyone to the Art of Paying Attention. I am your host, Ryan J. Pelton, where paying attention is our proper and endless work. That's what Mary Oliver said, the poet. And we are here paying attention today to Elizabeth Zelinka. And I love this conversation with Elizabeth. She is an expert in thriving in retirement. She talks about how when she retired, often people are just kind of cash it in and they don't know what to do. And she talks about thriving in retirement. So if you're moving towards retirement or one day you want to retire, you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and you're saying, hey, what does retirement look like for me? How can I leverage my skills and my talents and my experiences to thrive in retirement? So you're going to love my conversation with Elizabeth because we want to rock our second half. I've been talking about that a lot lately. If you've been following along with me, this midlife isn't just about cashing it in. It's not about slowing down. It's about stepping up. And so Elizabeth is going to help us. I'm so glad that you're here again. It's been fun getting these episodes out into the world. I have a backlog of conversations, but I wanted to mention once again that we are not only on audio. You can listen to the podcast on audio because that's what a podcast is, but we also have it on video. So my YouTube channel, Ryan J. Pelton, you can find me there as I'm posting the videos of these conversations. I know a lot of people like the video. Somebody said, hey, Ryan, why are you only on audio? Why don't you get on the video? All the kids are on the video. So I'm like, hey, I want to be cool. I want to be hip. I want to be with it. Let's get on the video. Let's get on the vids. Is that what we're calling it? The vids? I don't know if we're calling it the vids, but it's become vids. I'm going to make that cool. Everyone's going to be calling it the vids. Hey, the Art of Paying Attention is on the vids. Now, I want to say something real quick here is I have some new software that I'm using. It looks very pretty and very nice, but a lot of my old interviews were shot on Zoom and they're not as nice quality, so you'll kind of see that. But future episodes coming down the road will have some better quality. My studio setup is a lot better. So can I just make a shameful plug? I'm not sponsored by them, but Riverside, go get Riverside. Go Google Riverside. If you need to edit videos, if you need to make podcasts, if you need to look pretty on the videos, go check out Riverside. It makes it so easy. I'm not techie at all. I don't know what I'm doing, but it makes editing and producing so easy. So go check it out. Well, hey, I love talking to Elizabeth Zelinka. She was passionate. She's thriving in retirement and she's written books. I'm going to put all the information in the show notes. And I want you to thrive in your second half. And so thank you, Elizabeth, for helping us pay attention to our second half. And here is my conversation with Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth, it is so good to have you on the show today. And if you've listened to the show, we always ask, what are you paying attention to today?
What am I paying attention to? Well, I guess my focus today has been on a number of conversations like this with people interested in sort of my professional work. And so thinking about crisply describing what I do and who I work with and, what I focus on has really been my whole day.
Well, I love it. Well, I'm so glad to have you on the show. And you mentioned off air that, the show's about paying attention and our attention being a vital resource that we have, really the main resource we have. And so you've been paying attention to a lot of kind of different seasons of life and retirement age and what does life look like after we retire. And I know you were a former attorney and have a really interesting story. So back us into a little bit of your origin story. So how did you get on this topic of attention, kind of retirement and making the most of that and kind of who we are after those maybe official work years? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I will. Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief, but focused enough to tell the story. So yes, I did sort of launch myself into the world as a little high achiever type, and I was always chasing the straight A's and all of that. Eventually decided I did want to go to law school and ended up, getting into a good school and worked full time while I went at night. And so got even more used to the unbelievable grind that comes with, hard work and kind of nothing but chasing achievement and success. So landed at, a top Wall Street firm and had a big international legal practice for 10 years. And I was in the DC office of this law firm. And one day sort of realized that it was colliding in a really unpleasant way with my role as a mother. And I had a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. And, it just occurred to me I couldn't really get an A+ in both places. And I made the really, really honestly painful decision to leave my career around 35. And I explained it to everybody at the time. I'm front ending my retirement. Don't worry, I've got this all figured out, as if the word retirement held some substantive answer for me. But what I was really trying to say was that I had enough money that I could push pause and then figure out how my life was going to work. Figuring I could always go back and make more money. Well, what was funny to me about that is that it was such a thin explanation for what I had done. And when I, moved my family across the country and sort of became a full-time mom, I also realized I'd lost my identity. I'd lost my life structure. I'd lost my community. I'd lost my mental stimulation. I lost a lot of things. And I was really lost for 2 or 3 years trying to figure out how I had gone from this sort of superpower, high power person to somebody that could barely explain to anyone else who I was. So that inflection point, as painful as it was for me, helped me uncover some of these blind spots that I now help my clients get prepared for, so they aren't blind spots, as they approach and contemplate leaving an intense career and stepping into this new chapter. I don't look at retirement as a destination. I look at it as an inflection point that, we move through. I think of it more like a graduation. However, it's very, very disruptive to life, and all we talk about is saving money. So I learned the hard way that it's about way more than that.
Well, I love you sharing this part of your story because I think it's such an important subject for a lot of people. I've watched a lot. My father actually took a early retirement, and then I remember he was fairly, young and still healthy and could do things, and then realized he hated retirement and wanted to get back into work because he just felt like, what am I going to do all day? And I feel like I still have something to offer the world. And so it's kind of, for him, it was like this, it sounded great on paper. And then he's like, I just don't want to play golf every day. I feel like I could still help people and make an impact. So I love this conversation. I've been around a lot of folks too that really are, once they retire, they kind of do find this kind of like yourself, these moments of like, okay, who am I and what is my identity? And it's interesting. So retirement is kind of this new concept. I mean, if you live in America, this is a new idea in the last 50 years. This is not something that's been around for, you work and then you have this money and then you can kind of just do what you want, travel, whatever. Right. This is a whole new thing, but I don't think we're talking about, well, what does that mean for the human? What does that mean for our identity? What does that mean for, we're living a lot longer. So if you have 30 years, what are we supposed to do with our time? And is that just, doing crosswords and reading spy novels,
so
all the cliches, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So kind of going back to your story a little bit is, obviously you begin to realize, I don't know who I am and my work is so much a part of me. And I, became a mother, and what a, noble cause that is, obviously. But then you kind of go, okay, well, but now what? So what does it look like for you in your work when you're working with a client or coaching somebody or, encouraging somebody, like where do we begin? Like, how do we kind of find ourselves again? What was kind of your steps, and then kind of what do you do as far as your work?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think what I'd say, I'll start with some of the takeaways that came out of my own revelations and explain how that informs the work. But when we work with people, approaching this, the whole fact that they've come to work with us indicates, they are somewhat unsettled by what's coming. And they don't necessarily feel they've got it all figured out. And my clients, as my book title implies, I tend to work with people who come out of pretty intense careers, and they are self-described high achievers. And I do not mean that in a braggadocious way. I mean that we are type A, it's like if we're not working on something or achieving or moving forward, it's a problem for us. So as they contemplate 365 Saturdays in a row, that is just not going to work. And they know it, but they haven't the first clue how to begin building into something else. So it's just sort of like, what would I do? Who would I be? And so I always remind them there were really 2 big projects we've got ahead, and they're different for everybody, but they're the same exercises. One is we've got to bridge our identities from what we've been doing into new spaces and connect with the enduring parts of ourselves that aren't going to change, because it's very easy to forget about those things. They are so with us that we don't think about them. So we do a lot of work on identity issues, on the roles that people play in their working lives, which usually are anywhere from 5 to 10 different roles, like in a career. You may be a mentor, you may be a leader, you may be a salesperson. I mean, who knows, or a lawyer, an advisor. So you break all that down and realize there were parts of that you can take forward into new spaces. What have you loved? What do you want to keep doing? What would you like to leave behind? So there's, plenty of work to do there. But the other big one is life restructuring, because work has been the scaffolding around which most people have organized their lives. And it sounds obvious, but when you think about what that really means, it suggests that if you pull the scaffolding out overnight, the rest of it sort of collapses in a pile, and there's no architecture. So it's a little bit of a mess to clean up, instead of saying, well, if I'm going to redesign it without this huge monolithic career, how would I do that? And you get yourself into this mode of creativity. Instead of being reactive and waiting for stuff to come your way, you start getting busy designing what you want it to look like. And the minute people get their heads around the intentionality that can come with those two exercises, it actually gets quite fun, because for the first time in life, you are probably as free as you've ever been, and you've got some measure of financial wherewithal. And so there's a lot to create with. And so then you start creating new constraints that give you structure so that you can then leave space for spontaneity and experimentation. But it is a mindset shift, because when we're working, we're usually responding to everything coming at us all day. We're not in the mindset of, well, let me go out and create my day. The day creates us.
No, that's really helpful, because I think that's a interesting point you're making about, when your days are so structured and people are telling you, okay, this is what you have to do today, or this is where you need to be, or whatever, and then that goes away. And now you're going, okay, well, now I have to be the one to kind of structure my day. I have to be the one that, kind of calls the shots, if you will. And I imagine that's I think I have experienced that a little bit with my dad and some other people that I know, that it's like, oh, I don't even know what day it is anymore, because my days were so structured. It's today, Tuesday, Wednesday, where are we supposed to go? And for some people that probably is very overwhelming, because they like structure and they like having things to do. And then when that goes away, it's like, okay, now again, who am I? What am I doing? Am I just gonna watch Netflix all day? Or what does that even look like? Right.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious around this conversation. So it seems like a lot of people are starting to talk a little bit more about this, and not when you get to retirement, like, the year before, the 2 years before, but also saying like, hey, I've been working this job, and a lot of people we talk to, it's creative people, entrepreneurs, artists. They realize they had this very creative part of themselves, but were never able to exercise it. And so they actually start kind of early on thinking about, well, what would it look like if I could write more, or paint more, or build stuff, or, whatever. But they start thinking about that before retirement actually comes, and start kind of working on it on the side, or kind of maybe tapping into that. Have you found that to be like true in people you've worked with, or just other kind of disciplines that don't fit maybe in the one that they're, if you're a lawyer, like you were, something that's totally different, they're a jazz, pianist or something, whatever, I don't know. But yeah,
No,
what have you seen kind of
100%.
in that world?
100%. So, not everybody, has a dormant creative sort of thing they want to reactivate, but a lot of people do, or they've got what I call their unlived lives. It's like, I went through door A. I'm not unhappy I did, but I always wondered what was behind door B. And that's different for different people. But I have a great story about this it's one of my favorites, about one of our clients who was a real estate lawyer with a big, very, very elite firm, and had a great career, but he was just ready to be done with it at 55. He's like, look, I've had my fill. And he had had made enough money that he felt like he had the freedom to make that decision. So we asked him if he could do anything, forget whether it seems feasible, if he could succeed in anything next, what would he choose to do? And he said, well, don't tell anyone this, because it's never going to happen, but I'd be a Broadway producer. And the cherry on top would be I'd win a Tony Award.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love stuff like this. So let's get into it. Why is it so unfeasible? Tell me why, and It's like, well, I don't know how. And he gave me a lot of reasons. And we said, well, let's forget all the reasons you can't do it. People do it. So let's figure out how people do it. So what's the next thing you would do to get closer to understanding what this would take? And it always comes down to two things. You got to do some research, and it's like, who can help me? There are people in your world who can help. So he starts working this process. Before you know it, he's sort of got a game plan. And my favorite, the sort of punchline is 3 years after that meeting, he was standing on the stage accepting a Tony Award for the musical Hadestown, which he
Wow.
helped executive produce. He's now produced 8 Broadway musicals, and he is full throttle a Broadway producer with shows in Chicago and New York. He is loving life.
Mm.
And he's just like, this is insane. Like this was my dream. I didn't dare say it out loud, but the
Mhm.
fact that I did gave me that first belief that I could actually try. And what
Mhm.
risk of failure is there really, right? It's just
Mhm.
an ego thing at this point. Just try. So
Mhm.
anyway, I love that story, and there are many others like it.
Mhm.
But if you believe it's possible and you just start moving in the right direction, it's pretty amazing what
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
create.
Well, and I think you're naming kind of put retirement aside, but just work in general. And it's almost like people aren't given permission to say, hey, you're not just one thing. Like you're not, I this Chase Jarvis talks about, we're all hyphens. We have these, different parts of us. So it's like if you're, what was it, real estate,
Lawyer. Yeah.
yeah, lawyer. It's like, yeah, but I also like musicals and I like, making art or, because it, again, we see each other as just this, well, Elizabeth's a lawyer and that's just what she does and she's nothing else. But
Yes.
no, but she's also a mother and a wife
Yes.
and she's an author. And she, has all these hobbies and things. But we like to put people into kind of boxes. And then when they go like, hey, I'm working on this book, you're like, well, you're a lawyer. You
Yeah.
can't work on a book. That's not the same, but in reality, we all know that. I mean, all of our friends, all of our family, they all have things, my grandma always talked about, wanting to get more into piano. She never, she always blames the kids and blames her work and all that, but, wanted to be more proficient at that. But she always tinkered around and loved doing that. And so, yeah, I think it's just interesting how we kind of put these kind of parameters around work and around
Mhm.
who we are and our identity and say, this is the only thing that you're allowed to do.
Right.
Um, does it feel like a lot of your work is kind of giving people permission to kind of dream and kind of think bigger and not say, hey, well, you're a lawyer, so that means you have to get into consulting after retirement, or you have to get into, whatever lawyer.
Yes.
I mean, maybe some people want to do that. Obviously they can, but saying, hey,
Yes.
let's dream about this. Let's give permission around this.
Without a doubt.
Mhm.
And again, I think about mindsets is such an important word with this work, because when you're working, whatever it is you're being paid to do, you're getting paid to get it right. Right. And so no, most people aren't getting paid to experiment.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you get out of the mindset of having that freedom to try something and realize that experiments just give us data. They don't really succeed or fail. They just give us data. It's like, okay, give it a shot and see what happens. And so, but that mindset requires a person to be okay with things not going the way their hypothesis predicted or the way that they wanted it to go. And at work, you are much more in that zone of get it right and keep moving,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
people forget how to experiment, they forget how to play. They forget how to be creative because they're being reactive. They forget, they have tunnel vision often about what is possible. They've been on the same track for so long.
Mhm.
So I do see a lot of our job is to open up thinking, expand thinking, and even get that critical voice to just sit on the bench for a little while some of these wild ideas come out, because you also, I'm sure, can imagine how quickly somebody's ready to kill their idea. I mean,
Mhm.
I can always tell when I've hit on a closely held dream, because the second it comes out of their mouth, they say things like, don't write that down, or
Mhm.
it's never going to happen. I
Like
mean, it's
embarrassment.
almost
Yeah.
like I don't even want to get my hopes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you kind of notice them lighting up when they talk about those things. Like when they talk about real estate, they're like, it's fine, but
Right.
then they talk about, their sculptures they're making in their garage or
Yep.
whatever. And they're like, yeah, I got to tell you about this new thing,
Yeah.
yeah, listen to that. Listen to, what is that kind of lights you up and goes, well, what
Yeah.
if, why
That's
not?
right. Yeah.
This is really helpful because, my dad, I always go back to my dad a little bit, but, one of the things he told me, and one of his most honest, he wasn't very, open about his job and just kind of
Mhm.
vulnerable. He's just that certain generation that kind of just didn't talk about their feelings or whatever. And but in this moment of honesty, when he had retired and then kind of went back into nonprofit world, he said, Ryan, yeah, I would have never said this 30, 40 years ago, but um, you know, I'm telling younger employees now and people I know, just like run after your dreams, run after your passions. Like, because he said, I just did the corporate job. It was stable. It was a promised pension. It was, you know, and again, many, many years ago when that was a possibility, which obviously that's shifted a lot for a lot of people.
Sure.
You know, you can't just go, oh, I got an education and then I get a, you know, a cushy job and I'll be good for 40 years or whatever. Um, but you know, now that he's kind of doing what he really loves, he realizes like, yeah, that if I would have done my life all over again, I would have taken some more risks. I would have, you know,
Mhm.
tried a few different things rather than just saying it's got to look like this. And yeah, you know, he didn't want to do the responsible thing. He had a kid, he had a wife, he had, you know,
Yeah.
responsibilities, you know, all that stuff. That's not, you know, dishonorable by any means. Um, but all that to say, you know, how early, you know, when you're working with clients or as you think about this, how would you talk about, you know, even thinking about these things earlier than, you know, getting to the end of your career and going like, okay, now what? But I mean, should people be thinking about these in their 30s and 40s and, you know, um, hey, what would it look like to shift, or what does it look like when you're done? Or, you know, I think you said the gentleman retired at like 55. I mean, depending on your work, I mean, I know police officers, they retire at 50, 55. I have a social worker friend he can retire right now. He's 50, you know. So it's like, what do I do for the next 35 years? You know, it's
Right.
kind of
Exactly.
crazy. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, is it ever too early to start thinking about these things, or, you know, how would
Absolutely
you
not.
frame that?
I, it's a really good question because I think we are a little bit unhelpfully marketed to with the whole save your money in the 401k
Hmm.
situation
Hmm.
to think that the entire story is about saving money. That's
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
right? It's like, oh, as long as I save my money, everything else will be great.
Hmm.
That is so far from the truth. And so the way I think about it is you have to imagine that you've got a financial portfolio, but you've also got, as an analogy, a health portfolio,
Hmm.
a relationship portfolio,
Hmm.
an interest portfolio in terms of things that intrigue you, topics or hobbies or creative pursuits. You've even got a portfolio around your personal, like your inner life. I don't, whatever that is, right? Is it spiritual? Is it contemplation? Is it nature? I mean, these are real parts of life. And what we all tend to do is prioritize money over all of that because we are trying to create security for ourselves and our families. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I think what we fail to realize is that we have to be investing in those other things too. That's what makes a full
Hmm.
life and a
Hmm.
complete life. And even the money, I think, as one is saving in those younger years, I think it's valuable to be asking yourself, what am I saving it for? Because
Hmm.
once you are secure enough to continue living, a basic lifestyle that approximates your desire, whatever's left, I find it interesting. Most people don't want to spend it.
Hmm.
And yet, what's it there for then? It's really
Yep.
more, it's not much more than a theory until you deploy it in service of something you care about, whether it's taking care of other people, maybe it's philanthropy, maybe it's access to nice experiences. But I mean, I tell people even as early as 35 and 40, what are you saving your money for? And what is it going to mean in the world when you get there and it's yours? It's a tool.
Hmm.
What will you use it for?
Hmm.
And those are not questions anyone asks because they're just so busy socking it away
Yep.
that it's like, no, I'm just trying to build a giant iceberg and then I'm never going to touch it. It's like, but that's, it's an incomplete story,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good because I think what you know, reading your book and title and just kind of your work, it's like if you just see the word retirement, that's the first thing you think about is money, right? It's just
Yes.
like retirement is about money and making sure I have enough and 401ks and, you know, pensions and all that stuff. So I think it's really good that you're saying like, yeah, that we're this whole person and relationships and how do we invest in those and creativity, you know, whatever it is, soul, mind, heart, you know, all that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
not to use only my family as a reference, but I was also thinking about my grandfather and him and my grandma loved to travel, went to Europe a lot, just loved experiences together and with friends. And my grandpa worked really hard, was a dentist, had his own practice,
Mhm.
and worked a long time. But what happened was he got this rare intestinal disease
Yeah.
where he couldn't digest food correctly and got really weak. But his whole thing was, I got to keep putting money away so we can go to Europe and we can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then he got to this point where, I mean, they could have done it before that. He just, had this mindset of like, I got to get this certain amount or whatever. But
Yeah.
rather than taking advantage of, hey, we should have been doing this 10 years before that. And they were a little bit, but totally could have. But it's like, yeah, you're not thinking about what's it there for? What's this money there for?
Exactly.
And it's not guaranteed, obviously, in my grandpa's
Right.
case. He lived a long time, but he ended up, again, not being able to do as much, not leave home as much. So, um, no, I think that's really good. I'm really glad that you're kind of bringing up these ideas with people, because I think if someone were to come to you or read your book and go, okay, is this another book on 401ks and I need X amount of dollars to, not starve and,
Yeah.
whatever, rather than saying, hey, there's all these things I need to consider. There's all these parts of my life that I have to consider, beyond retirement. And we can start thinking about those things, today. Um,
Yes.
so what would be, someone comes to you, and you probably have real life examples of this, is like, a client comes to you and they're thinking about retirement, or maybe they're, in their mid 40s, or they're, 30s, 40s, 50s, kind of going, I still have a little while to go, but I want to start thinking about these things. What would you say is like a common theme that you run into, good and bad, as far as what would be kind of a common hang up, or what are the questions that people tend to have when they meet with you and wonder what they should be thinking about? Like, are they common? Are they different? Are they all over the map? Give us a little taste of kind of what
Yeah.
you're seeing out there.
Well, I think, I tend to work with people who are reasonably close to retirement so much
Mhm.
that it's become real, right?
Mhm.
With people, let's say, younger, sort of take myself at 35 as a good example, but people between 35 and 45, it's still so far away
Mhm.
that it's really like, it's almost like this distant goal line you're running toward, right? But it's still so far away that you don't really think about what's across the goal line. You're just
Mhm.
sort of like, I just know I need to get to this goal line.
Mhm.
And lately, I think people are more and more and more talking about retiring early, right? Like, it's like it would be a dream to be done at 40,
Mhm.
but what do you mean by be done?
Mhm.
So the way I think about that with younger people is, if you're talking about being done doing things you're only doing because someone pays you,
Mhm.
I get it. That's very transactional. It's
Mhm.
also what we all kind of have to do, right? But when you finally find the thing you will do, whether you get paid or not, more often than not, you end up getting paid for it because you're great at it and you're committed to it and you're all in. But you also enjoy it. It stops feeling like work and it
Mhm.
starts feeling like life. And so, my comment to younger people is, think about the life you want to lead that you never want to retire from. That's what hopefully
Mhm.
the first stage of working life is building a foundation so that you can have as much of that as is available. And
Mhm.
if the world's gonna, if you're doing good work in the world, you're going to get paid for it, whether you're doing it only to get paid or not, right? So my thought about it is, wouldn't it be nice to be in a place where you're making some contribution to the world and expanding yourself along the way, and the world's rewarding you in all the ways that naturally will, but you're never thinking to yourself, when do I do less of this? I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
I think that's really what people are after. It's
Mhm.
freedom. It's a sense of choice. It's like, I'm doing this because I want to do it.
Mhm.
And that is the freedom and the liberation that comes from truly retiring from a demanding career, even if you've loved it,
Mhm.
because demanding careers demand a lot. And
Mhm.
and to be able to say, I want to do less, or I want to have more open space, I want to have more control. I mean, those are the things people are looking for. They're not looking for pure leisure. That
Mhm.
just isn't, I mean, that's what we're sold,
Yeah.
the golden years and walking along a beach all day. But that's just hollow. There's
Yeah.
nothing there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets, I mean, that was my dad's story. I mean, he did really well, and he became a CEO of a big company. And then he realized, like, being a CEO of a big company was not that great,
Yeah.
and it just demanded it just kind of sucked out his soul, because you always had to be on. You never had a break. You always
Yep.
had 200 emails that needed
Yep.
attention now.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think so. Even for that, it was like, okay, I got this thing. I've, been rewarded financially, but I feel like I'm dying every day I go to work, and, you got boards, looking at you and your job performance, and, so many things are out of your
Exactly.
control. And, Yeah. No, I think that I love this conversation about, finding work that you aren't looking to retire from. Like, obviously you can't do it forever, but yeah, what would it look like to have a job or have a vocation that you really felt like called to and felt like this really suited me, and wasn't just trying to get to the weekend, because
Yes.
I couldn't handle it, and I just needed to, I wanted to retire because I needed to be done. Um, Now, Elizabeth, we need to talk about your book. So as of this recording, it's already live, which is great, and we'll put that in the show notes too. So you wrote a book called Encore, which I think is a fantastic title. Um, walk us through a little bit. Kind of, I always love to hear a little bit of your process too of the origin of the book and kind of what you were as you were thinking about these ideas and getting your own kind of business off the ground and things, or maybe you'd already been doing it for a while, but yeah, what were you kind of hoping to achieve through the book, and what was it like writing that book for you?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Because I guess anyone who's written a book knows it's such a massive project, and it's way bigger than you think it is when you start,
Mhm.
like most things. So, I mean, a number of years into doing this work, I knew from just the kind of feedback we were getting from our clients how impactful it was. I mean, I knew it was really helpful, and that what I had experienced was real. It wasn't unique to me. This is a phenomenon, and people need this help. And there's not that much of it out there, honestly. And so
Mhm.
I would find myself talking about the work I did to almost anybody, and they would immediately tell me they know 5 people who need to talk to me, which of course, what you start to realize is this really broad thing that's out there
Mhm.
and not a lot of resources. And so I would say as many as 5 to 6 years ago, I started thinking about the need for a book, but I was not yet organized enough in my own thinking to even imagine what that would be. I'd never written a long form, piece of work like that. So, um, and then what's interesting is I was asked to do a presentation for a major client, and it was a paid presentation. So I really wanted to focus on structuring my material well, and that ended up in a really interesting way forming the basis for the structure of my book. It occurred to me, I was like, oh my gosh, it wasn't so overwhelming, right? All I needed to do was put together a 2 hour presentation. And it's like, okay, suddenly the structure started to show up. And then I was able to start building out some of my thoughts. I got some collaborators involved, I got readers involved. And I mean, then I just got inspired and started writing. And it took a couple years, and I had a dry spell in there of about 4 months where I couldn't write a word. I'd gotten halfway through the book and just couldn't do it. And I thought, oh man, I'm not going to finish. Like, this is a bummer. And then one day I just got seized with the idea again. And I started and I wrote, spent every morning writing until I finished it. And I read soon after that, that what you have to learn as somebody in a creative project is that you need these downtimes to recharge yourself. I mean, I think the phrase was no flower blooms in 4 seasons. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so helpful to remember,
Mhm.
because when you're creating something, there will be a period of dormancy and recovery that you have to keep going. Anyway, that was a good lesson. But you get the book written, and then you've got to get it edited and proofed, and there's so much to do. And then there's a whole launching and marketing. It's unreal. So
Mhm.
I've been thrilled to get it out in the world, and really thrilled with the feedback, and excited to do another one. So,
Mhm. Great. No, yeah, especially with nonfiction. I mean, you have to be more precise. You're not just telling a story. You're trying to
yes.
give helpful information, and obviously you can't put all the information in there. And you want to be, so I imagine you working with clients, you probably got a lot of kind of feedback as far as what to include, what not to include, or
Yes.
where to kind of focus your attention. Because I love your work. I mean, the topics you're trying to hit again, hopefully, because it's funny, like I was skimming through Amazon the other day, and it was funny how many retirement books were actually just about like a number, right? It's like
Yes.
retire with 3 million, it was always, again, coming back to the money thing, but it didn't deal with like who we are as we retire. That's the only thing. It's like, oh, I'd love $4 million when I retire, but is that, that's the main
And then
goal?
what?
Yeah, then what, right? It's like, okay, great. Um, so yeah, so tell us a little bit, like, somebody picks up the book. Again, who's it for? I mean, do you have kind of that profile, that you
Mhm.
know, that avatar, would you say like this is probably the person that would probably gain the most out of it? Obviously, you'd say, hey, everyone can read it. It's relevant to everybody. But who would you say is like it's really for like someone listening right
Yeah.
now? They're like, I'd love to pick up this book. Is this for me?
No, I appreciate that question because I think there's a real answer to it
Mhm,
because, like any book, when you write it, you need to write with specific people in mind.
mhm,
And I really did write it with, the hundreds of clients I've worked with, mainly coming out of intense professional services careers. So lawyers, accountants, doctors, people
mhm,
who worked hard to get into their profession, made huge sacrifices educationally, and even life choices, right? These are callings in a way, and you've got to
mhm,
give it all. And so when I work with people coming out of those environments, they feel like they're leaving their community, almost their tribe, their family, almost,
mhm,
they've very identified with being that thing, a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, it's this, and then they give everything to their clients. They're always asking, what do you need? Never, what do I need? What do I
mhm.
want? That is never on the table. So
Yeah.
I
Hey,
I
Doc, what do you need today?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
They spend all day
Mhm,
at the service of other people, and that can be incredibly rewarding. And the other commonality is most of them don't have a big financial stressor when they reach the moment of
mhm,
retirement. So they've got that box checked in a way. And so I never want to minimize that that's an important issue for plenty of people, and I do not minimize it.
mhm,
But for a person who was sitting there ironically saying, "Oh my gosh, I do have plenty of money and I'm still stressed out and I don't know what to do," that the book is really about helping folks with those characteristics think intentionally about how not just to survive retirement, but turn it into something spectacular. I
mhm.
mean, I see it as a form of a graduation into what ought to be the most magnificent period of your life. Why wouldn't it be? You've got the wisdom of experience, you've got money, you've got time and space, relationships, know how. Why wouldn't you create a masterpiece? And the answer is only because I have no idea where to start.
Mhm.
And I just hope the book is that where to start.
I love that. I don't know if you've noticed this, but or you can look it up on YouTube too, is one of the fastest growing kind of themes or channels is people over 40, 50, 60 starting YouTube channels.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that's not the demographic of YouTube. But what they're offering is what you just described, their wisdom, their experiences.
Mhm.
Like, hey, I've been through a job. Hey, I've been married maybe a couple times. I've had
Yeah.
kids. I've fallen on my face. But it's
Yeah.
like people are craving that to say, like, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life? What,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and it's really interesting because people are offering a lot of great wisdom, and especially for younger generations, saying, hey, I've had
Yeah.
this career, I've had these families, I've had this, these experiences. I love that because that's kind of what it sounds like you're getting people excited about thinking about the future, not just this like
Yeah.
drudgery of like, oh no, I don't have anything to do on
Right.
Tuesday, but I have
Right.
something to offer. It is an interesting dynamic. And I don't, maybe you can help me think through this is like, I think of like a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer or, anyone that's, they really have, it's like, my job is to serve you. It's like, it's not
Mhm.
about me, right? When doctor,
Right.
you go to your doctor, they're not like, hey, check me out. It's more, you know, but what do they do when they don't have that in their lives, where they don't have every day of the week, they're helping someone.
Right.
It's not as much of a need. I mean, obviously you can help people in different ways, but you lose a part of yourself of like, this is all I know. I only know how to give services to other people and help other people. And then all of a sudden that's cut off.
Right.
I mean, it seems like, well, it's not a noble thing. We should all be giving ourselves away. But again, as a professional or as a human, you're like, well, what do I do now? Like, who can
Right.
I help? I mean, have people found themselves kind of in that space of like,
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I don't know what to do now. Like, I really don't.
Yeah.
Like, or they feel
Well,
guilty that I have to, am I selfish now because I'm only thinking about myself now? Or
that's very common.
right?
That's one of the issues I was just
Yeah.
going to say is that it's very hard to turn that off, right? Because you're at the service of other people. And so the answer is always yes. The answer is always, what do you need? And it's always, you have an endless, and I do mean endless list of
Mhm,
things to do that just show up in your inbox every day.
mhm,
And so I think it's extremely uncomfortable for people who are coming from those environments, especially after decades, to turn the focus on themselves and say, what do I want? First of all, that feels selfish.
mhm,
And it and it's also not a skill that's been very well honed. Um, and so what I try to help people think about is you've had a monolithic career, like this big thing that you've been at the service of. How about we now look at life as more of a mosaic, right? And there's going to be a component of that. You love it, and you're incredibly good at it. And there will be zillions of ways to keep being of service in this world, I promise. And in fact, the danger there is that when people find out you're retiring, you're going to get asked to do all kinds of things. And I always say to them, it's a no unless it's a hell yes. And don't be getting all involved in stuff. You know, you're going to get all consumed with all these things that now take all
All of
your
a sudden
time
you're a consultant and
Yes.
you're
Yeah. So
working more than you ever have. Yeah.
right, right. So I always say that, be careful about that, but think of it as a piece of your mosaic. And then again, look at these other parts of your life and let's get intentional. If you were going to make it really great, I mean, let's think about when it's been great before and do more of that. Let's figure out what it looks like and how are you going to structure your days? When do you like to be active? When do you want to be outside? When do you want to be with people? When are you sharp mentally? When do you want those 3 hours of deep focus? How many days a week do you want to be out for lunch? I mean, like getting granular, because if you don't do that planning in the beginning, people are creatures of habit. We just are. And we will lapse right back into those routines that we had at work. And I mean, like the kind of routine where you race out of bed and the first thing you do is go sit in front of your computer to see what emails are waiting for you. And all you have are spam, right? That's just depressing. So, you don't have to do that anymore. But when you don't design new routines for yourself, those habits are so strong. That's part of what happens to people is they just get pulled back into these habits that don't fit their life anymore. And it's like, well, what do I do about this? And they're not accustomed to asking themselves what they want. And so the whole exercise of working with us is to force that function and make them begin that designing process, at which point it gets quite fun. And then people are sort of off and running with it. But it's hard, I think, to conceive of that when you've been, showing up somewhere day after day, helping other people, never asking anything about what you want out of it other than a paycheck. And then suddenly it's all over. It's just a lot to, it's a lot to reorganize.
No, you hinted at earlier about the, almost like the question of like, hey, if you didn't do this job or you could do a reset, what would you have loved to have done? It seems like that would be a really like insightful question of, leading them down like, I've been a doctor my whole life, but you know what? I really would have loved to have done this or I really like doing this or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're going like, oh, you could do a lot of that. You could do a lot more of that, you could double down on that, whatever that, I mean, I've seen a lot of people become writers just for that reason, or like, I just want to write sci-fi novels, or whatever. That become
well, and people want to go become students again. They are uncomfortable not being masterful because they've been masterful, right? So there is some resistance sometimes to starting a new avocation where they don't yet know what they're doing. And so let's take writer, many people express that unmet interest and like, I'd love to do that. So, but they're like, I don't know how to do any creative writing. Okay. That's just a state of being at the moment. So what if you don't start judging yourself today as a writer, but you start judging yourself as a student of creative writing? That's where you start, right? Like everything. And that's like flips a switch because suddenly it's like, oh, wait, I know how to be a good student. Okay, that's way more comfortable. So again, you've just got to find that connection into what will allow you to take the step forward. And I can't tell you how many people want to go back to school or they want to go into some kind of structured learning for a little while just to get acclimated again to some topic that they've, left alone for a long time or a skill they want to acquire. And that's a nice transition too, because it is structured and it also brings a new community of people into your life that are interested in the same thing you are. And then many, many things will light up just with those two little factors together. So sometimes it's that simple. It's just having the courage to say, I want to become a screenwriter and I'm going to go take a course and see where it goes.
It's, it's so exciting. I think, the time, we can complain about the times in which we live, but I've gotten multiple emails over the years we interviewed a lot of writers, and I've
Yeah,
helped some writers in the past and things and give them some encouragement. And a 72-year-old lady, hey, I wrote my first novel, you know,
it's amazing.
80, 78-year-old guys like, hey, my first book's getting out in the world. I mean, same thing. Like it's just, and they're like, I'm not stopping until I'm dead.
Yeah.
You know,
Why
I
would
mean,
you, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you could live 20 more years and who knows how much work you could crank out. I mean, just for the joy of it. Right. So,
Yes.
uh, now
Exactly.
I do want to ask this. I've been, I'm curious about this is because you work with a lot of high achievers.
Mm.
Here's a deep kind of philosophical question is there ever a scenario where you try to help them be okay not being a high achiever? In other words, once you're a high achiever, can you shut off that pump? Or is there also just this sense of like, hey, you're not, 30 anymore. It's okay to just like rest. It's okay to not have to produce all the time. It's okay to like, is that part of your work, or is that just like, how do you kind of dance with like who we are, but also like you don't want to shut it off, but also going like, hey, when you're 92, you don't have to be like building an empire.
Right.
You know,
No,
um,
it's an awesome question.
yeah.
And I have both my own, growth about what that meant over time, and it comes up constantly with the population that
Mhm.
I do work with. So the way that I think about that issue is that when I use that phrase high achiever, I mean a couple of things. I mean, one is I think some of us are just wired that way,
Mhm.
or else it was reinforced when we were so young, we don't recall being any other way, right? Where
Yeah.
we wanted the ladder to climb, and it was energizing to see how far we could push
Mhm.
the edge of our comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that's just an interesting way to be in the world. But here's the dangerous part of it: we end up often seeking all of our validation from external resources or sources. And our schools are built that way.
Mhm.
Our working worlds are built that
Yeah.
way. We're paid based on our performance, or we get our bonus based on that.
Yeah.
It's just so before long, if you're not careful, you really do forget that you can source approval from yourself instead of the peanut gallery out there.
Mhm.
And look, I think, I'm not bashing it. It's just part of the way life works. And look, I applaud people who achieve highly. I try to achieve highly, but at the same time, what I learned was I was not making myself very happy looking for love in all the wrong places.
Mhm.
It's like I'm really the one at the end of all of this that has to like myself, my life, and be proud of what I'm doing in this world. And you've got to just decide that all those other opinions can only matter so much.
Mhm.
That's the evolution. And I think if you try to take the third party validation model into this retirement chapter, it's going to be really tough because everyone's going to create a very unique sort of experience for themselves. And it's not something the rest of the world is going to have that many opportunities to weigh in on. And if you need them to, you're going to be trapped in the success loop again
Mhm.
instead of the enjoy your life loop and
Yeah.
instead of the just make a contribution loop. So that's the conversation we typically have about it when it comes up. And it does come up. I think people who are used to being, like at the top are
Mhm.
like, yikes, what does it mean if I'm not at the top? And then you just have to ask yourself what that ever meant. I mean, what did it mean?
Right.
And so it's a very important discussion. And I targeted the book, or I oriented it that way because I'm speaking as much from my own journey as I
Mhm.
am to the people that I know had to be wired in a similar way to get where they got and to still be doing it at 16.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and this isn't to like degrade anyone that's, not a, CEO of a company or an accountant or a,
Yeah.
a lawyer or a doctor. But I imagine I mean, there's a lot of people that when they want to be done with their work. I mean, they're not going like, I need to climb another hill. I need to, I want to kind of be done with this, whatever this is, maybe they
Yeah.
weren't paid enough, or maybe it was just hard work or it's backbreaking work or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think it's different, but then when you are kind of the always needed, always on, always, it's like
Yes.
this adrenaline thing that like you don't know how to turn off. You don't know how to,
Yes.
and I love this. I imagine you probably find some healing in people too, because sometimes they, in our honest moments, we go, hey, I only did this job because I just wanted people to like me.
Yeah.
I only do this job because I need the applause. Or my dad was never happy with me, so
I had
I
something
want
to
him.
prove.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
him to tell me he's proud of me or whatever. And you realize like you're so driven by that narrative that, once it goes away, you're like, wow, I really was living somebody else's story, living
Right.
somebody else's dream, not my own.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that could probably be pretty painful at the beginning, and then but yet finding some freedom and some healing on the other side of that.
Yeah.
What a fun job you get to do. Uh,
Yeah.
so
See,
so
not one I
Elizabeth,
want to retire from.
yeah, I know you're gonna just keep going. Well, Elizabeth, this has been so great, and I know you've almost just like coached all of us as we're listening, and helped a lot of people that are probably in this space or going to be in this space. I mean, if you're alive and working, and we're all going to be there at some point. Um, what would kind of be like as we land the plane? What would kind of be like a summary of what would you want to just tell people? Like if you could just say, "Hey, this is my statement for you, my encouragement to you, my words of affirmation, whatever, however you want to frame that. What would you want to say?"
Yeah, I think what I'd say, or remind people of, is that if you are somebody who is unsettled by either a soon to be retirement, or maybe you're going through it, and it's really rocky, and you're feeling unsettled, you are just not alone. And please know that. Everybody goes through this. I have not met a single person who wasn't unsettled in some way by this change. It's a huge life change. And just because everybody else thinks you should be popping the cork out of the champagne does not mean it isn't challenging. And so don't think you're alone. Don't let yourself get isolated. Get with other people who've been through it. Be honest, talk about it, and start getting excited, because you really ought to be able to create something absolutely fabulous for yourself, but you got to believe that's possible first. And you just be around positive people who can say, I'm telling you, it's good over here.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's it. So Elizabeth, I know the book's out. Now is the book everywhere?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we'll have that in the show
Amazon.
notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what is the best place to find you if people want to connect up with you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to find all the touch points is through LinkedIn,
Mhm.
Elizabeth Zelinka Parsons, and you'll see, my business websites are both there. You certainly, the link to my book is there. Other articles and talks that I've been on, all there. So
Great.
that's probably the right place to find me. And yeah, I just very much appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Elizabeth, for coming on the show. And I know you helped a lot of people today, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan. It's a great show. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.